What's up, everyone? So recently, quite a few of you guys have been asking me to do lineup reviews at the end of each NFL week. So that's exactly what I'm going to do today. Really quickly, a quick disclaimer. This is for the Sunday slate only. As of right now, the Monday night game has not been played. So let's go ahead and hop into this week's lineups. Okay, so I'm going to talk about three different lineups. First up, we have my cash game lineup. Then I'm going to talk about a really interesting tournament lineup. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about my lowest scoring lineup. So with this cash game lineup, I was very fortunate. You can see that I did pretty well. Anytime that you can get well over 190 points in cash, you should be really satisfied because you're probably going to make a lot of profit that week. And it was a pretty good week for me. So on an average scoring week, you're probably going to need around 150 so points to cash in cash games. This particular week, you needed about 170 or so to cash in my particular contest. So definitely a high-scoring week this week, and I can't complain about it. You can see here that there's a couple different guys I want to talk about. Number one is Tate. Now, I was actually a little bit surprised he wasn't higher owned. I thought he was going to be a lock for over 35% owned, honestly. And you can see that I went with a lot of chalk in this lineup. But a lot of this chalk just had such a good matchup that you really just couldn't turn away. You know, matchup plus volume equals must plays, in my opinion. And, you know, Jaquiz Rogers was a must play. I thought Mike Evans and AJ Green were both must plays. Now, the one guy that you guys probably had in most of your cash game lineups that I don't have is Julio Jones. Now, initially, when I made my first cash game lineup, I had Julio, AJ, and Mike Evans in there. I was able to fit all three of them in there, and I felt so good about it. But once we heard that LaShawn McCoy was going to get about 25 to 30 snaps, I decided to take Gillislee out. So what I had Spencer Ware, Jaquiz Rogers, and then Mike Gillislee in the flex. And then I spent down a little bit at the defense position and went with the Titans defense. And then I was able to put Julio in the spot of Tate. And that lineup would have worked out. I haven't really compared the points. I think it would have scored just about as much, if not a little bit more. Ultimately, this lineup obviously ended up doing just fine for me. Tate was a guy I wasn't expecting to put up a ton of points like he did last week, but you were really just hoping for some volume. I mean, there was no Theoretic, there was no Eric Ebron again this week, just like last week. So you're really just hoping that he could get, 6 or 7 receptions with, maybe 70 to 80 yards. And it's about what he did. I think he had like 93 receiving yards or so he's flirting with that 100-yard bonus. He had some red zone targets as well. He did actually catch one in the back of the end zone, but didn't get both feet down or something like that. So I didn't watch much of that game, but when I was watching, he was getting a lot of targets. So I like Jack Doyle all week long, but I was kind of saving him for myself. But Vernon Davis didn't do bad. A lot of people actually went Vernon Davis in cash as well, and apparently he was 1 yard away from scoring a touchdown. So 3 more feet, and Vernon Davis would be right around where Jack Doyle was. So all in all, it was just a week where the chalk really hit, and that's why so many people did well in cash. Also, really quickly, a really common question that I get is, should you enter high-stakes double-ups or low-stakes double-ups? I recommend entering low-stakes double-ups and just find one good lineup that you really like and enter it in a ton, because that's exactly what I did with this lineup. Alright, so for my second lineup, this is a tournament lineup, and I was in a contest with a lot of really sharp players, so I knew that I had to do something a little bit different. Now, the one kind of misconception when building a tournament lineup is that people think that they have to build the lineup completely differently, and you don't necessarily have to do that. And what I mean by that is a lot of people think, okay, if I'm paying up at wide receiver in cash games, I need to be paying up at running back in tournaments and then paying down at wide receiver in tournaments to be a lot different. That's a good strategy, and that's going to work sometimes, but I don't think you always have to do that. So you can see here, I didn't necessarily pay up at running back like I did in cash games, but I still went with the chalk running backs. I went with Spencer Ware and Jaquiz Rogers, and I still locked in AJ Green. I still locked in a really popular wide receiver that I felt good about. He was the number one guy in the big three for me, if you will, this week, in Mike Evans, Julio, and then AJ, obviously. But after that is when I really started to be different. I went with Brandon Marshall. Now, in this range, there was a lot of different choices you had. You could have went Allen Robinson. You could have went Amari Cooper. You could have went Mike Evans, obviously. So there's a lot of different choices in there. I believe T.Y. Hilton was in there as well. So I wanted to go Brandon Marshall because I figured he would be the lowest owned of the bunch. Not only that, I felt like he had a good matchup. Jimmy Smith was dealing with concussion, who after last week he left the game. Odell Beckham Jr. went off. Also, last time Geno Smith had started a game in 2014, I think it was, he targeted Brandon Marshall 18 times that week. So I thought he had some upside. He's an elite player who had a relatively okay matchup, but I just figured everybody was going to be scared off of him because of the quarterback situation. And I mean, rightly so, but at the same time, I figured he was worth the risk. And obviously, it really didn't end up working out too well, but all in all, I don't regret that pick because it really could have paid off if he would have hit. Next up, I have Mike Wallace, and I was shocked that he was lower owned than Brandon Marshall. Mike Wallace is in a significantly better matchup than Marshall, I think. Obviously, he's not quite the talent, and Joe Flacco was dealing with some shoulder discomfort throughout the week, so maybe that's what scared some people away. But I really, really liked Mike Wallace. I talked about him in my sleeper/value picks video on Friday, and all in all, that ended up being a really, really good pick. I went with the Marcus Mariota and Delanie Walker stack. Delanie Walker, again, he was a guy who was coming off a really, really bad week, and he actually ended up having his highest fantasy scoring day on the year. So that was an okay pick with Delanie. Marcus Mariota let me down a little bit. I believe the last 2 weeks he had at least 5 designed runs. And this game, I think he only had 2 rushes for like 14 yards or something like that. So that really let me down. I thought he was really going to have some rushing upside in this game. So disappointed with that. I also went with Terrell Williams, who, again, I talked about in my main Wednesday video. He was in a good matchup. Travis Benjamin actually playing in this game helped Terrell Williams a lot because Terrell Williams was actually going to see a lot of Desmond Trufant. But since Travis Benjamin ended up playing, he didn't see much of him at all. And we're starting to see the Falcons maybe show their true colors. I don't know. We'll have to see. Last season, they did the same thing. They got out to a really hot start, and then they fell flat in their face. So, and then last up was the Titans defense. Again, I thought they were in a good spot. But, what can you say? I mean, I can't believe Andrew Luck didn't turn the ball over. So, I really like this lineup. And it could have did better. It's one of those rare situations, or I guess not rare, but it's one of those uncommon weeks where, your tournament lineup didn't outscore your main cash game lineup. Now, this wasn't my highest scoring tournament lineup, but I figured it was worth pointing out here because a lot of interesting ways to go about building lineups, and I really like the way that I built this lineup, and it could have hit a lot better. All right, so here is my lowest scoring lineup on the week, and it is a really, really interesting lineup. So first off, I went with the Joe Flacco, Mike Wallace stack, and obviously Mike Wallace played pretty well. Joe Flacco, on the other hand, didn't do so hot, and you can see he only put up 7.5 points. But the one thing I want to point out is I think people were scared off of him because of the injury to his shoulder and whatnot, but still, going up against this New York Jets defense who have been shredded through the air for much of this season, he's not even 1% owned, half of a percent owned in this contest. I could not believe that. I mean, maybe the joke's on me because he didn't play well, but 0.5% owned against one of the worst defenses, at least passing defenses, in the NFL. Like, that was just unbelievable to me. I could hardly fathom that. So, again, I think some people were scared off of him because of the injury and whatever. That's completely understandable. But next up, I played Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman. I played both of them. And this is probably something that was a little bit more common this week than expected. But we've seen both of these guys play really well in the same game. I mean, I think they're both averaging like 16-plus fantasy points per game right now. We saw both of these guys go off against the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, it was in New Orleans, so that's a little bit different. Those games are like ridiculously high scoring in that stadium. But I think Tevin Coleman had like 3 rushing touchdowns in that game, and Devonta Freeman was getting a lot of work through the air. So we've seen them both be very successful on the field at the same exact time. So that's kind of what my thought process was there. I mean, the Chargers are really vulnerable in the past now without, Brandon Flowers didn't play that game. Obviously, we know Jason Verrett is out for the season now. But they were also really vulnerable on the ground, so I thought maybe they both could get involved in the running game. So, I don't regret those guys. I've already talked about Brandon Marshall. Allen Robinson's a guy that I think I regret picking because he's a guy that, I'm a big fan of. I just think he's a great player. But recently, so far this season, he's just been playing terrible. There's just no way around it. I heard a stat that in the last 70 pass attempts Blake Bortles has, Allen Hurns and Allen Robinson have dropped 10% of all those passes, or maybe it was 10 passes in those last 70. I don't remember specifically, but nevertheless, Allen Robinson and Allen Hurns are both dropping a ton of passes so far this season, and they're really letting me down. Now, next up, I have Vernon Davis and Rob Gronkowski, and this is another great way to differentiate your lineup is play 2 tight ends. Now, obviously, Gronkowski is basically a wide receiver, especially at that price at 7,200. So anytime that you can get one of these high-end tight ends in your lineups, if you can find a very, very cheap tight end point producer like Vernon Davis in this particular situation, like I said, it's a really, really great way to differentiate your lineup from the field, especially if somebody else has the same exact lineup as you. If you play a tight end in your flex, like not many people do that. So again, it's just a really good way to make your lineup a little bit different. Vernon Davis, I talked about that earlier as well. He was about 3 feet away from scoring a touchdown, which would have helped me. But ultimately, Allen Robinson and Brandon Marshall really is what killed this lineup. And I did go with the Chiefs defense, which wasn't a bad choice. 3% owned. I thought they would be a little bit lower, to be honest. But, Drew Brees didn't play bad. I was kind of going off of those home road splits that we've all talked about so much. And the Chiefs still, forced some turnovers. They had some sacks. They did everything that the Chiefs usually do, especially at home in Arrowhead Stadium. So it was just one of those lineups where, I had the pieces together that I wanted, and it just didn't really work out. So, looking back at it, I think the one guy I really do regret taking is Allen Robinson. Maybe if I could have went, a guy like T.Y. Hilton, that would have helped me a little bit. But it still wouldn't have put me in the cash because Flacco didn't come through. So moving forward, I'm still going to build lineups like this, but I need to be a bit smarter moving forward. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in. Please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed and you want to see more of these. Let me know. Also, really quickly, a quick update on the NBA DFS videos. I plan on doing 2 of those a week, not this week, but next week moving forward. I plan to do those videos on Tuesday and Thursday for the Wednesday and Friday slates. Let me know if you think those are 2 good days to do those videos. Moving forward, I may not stick to that schedule, 100%, just depending on each week because different slates and whatnot. But all in all, I think that's my plan right now. So let me know if you guys are looking forward to that and you want me to do that. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Later.